Hey everybody, how's it going? Another beautiful day in paradise. So, recently I watched a video on the Joe Rogan podcast. Or I listened to the video on Joe Rogan podcast. And I got to listen to Crystal Ball and I forget his name, Sagar. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. But they got to talk and have their little, back and forth about a discussion that I thought was very fascinating. Let's watch.
Whereas, so look, on the military front, let's think about our history. Eisenhower, 1957, calls in the 101st Airborne Division in order to forcibly integrate Little Rock High School to allow the Little Rock Nine to enter that school because a white supremacist violent mob and the local authorities could not be trusted to do so. I think that's a legitimate use. 1967, LBJ calls in the military to quell race riots in Detroit. I think that's legitimate. Rodney King, George H.W. Bush, calls in the Marines in order to restore order. You have to restore and crack down exactly on the people we're talking about, these criminals. A lot of them are sociopathic criminals, just taking advantage of the situation. And from that forward, we have to move and act within the political system. Now, Crystal seems to think, I think, that acting within the political system is just not a choice at this point. But I disagree, because, even if you're on the left, like Joe Biden out today saying he endorses this Hakeem Jeffries bill on banning police chokeholds.
Right.
And
why is anyone paying attention right now?
I don't think it's because of violence.
That's what's uncomfortable.
I just reject the idea.
I'm not talking about violence. And by the way, majority of the violence I've been seeing has been coming from the cops. And there's never as much focus. The example of,
I could send you some videos.
I've seen some stuff too.
Yeah.
And I'm not justifying anything, but I've also seen some unconscionable tactics from the police.
100%.
And there's no focus anytime on that. I've seen the police inciting and creating the dangerous situation. Do I have any confidence that given what we saw on TV with the military police coming in and tear gassing and rubber bullets, peaceful populations, that they're going to come in as peacekeepers in these cities? Absolutely not. If you bring the military in, you are starting a war. You're not ending violence. You're escalating violence. And that's the thing.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you stop the looters?
Yeah, perfect question.
I think local law enforcement. If the cities aren't up to it, fine. They can call in the National Guard. But
that's the military police
the president to bring in the American military into cities across the country without local consent, I think is insane.
But he's only saying that if they don't use the National Guard.
Right.
Think about the context of if you saw this happening in another country, right? It's hard to look at our own country through neutral lens. If you looked at a foreign country and you heard that their president was bringing in the military to quash protesters, would you be like, oh, this is going to go great? No. Usually what happens next.
Hold on. He's not bringing in the military to squash protesters. He's bringing in the military to stop rioters and looters.
How can you say that?
There's a difference.
But how can you say that when we see military police on TV shooting rubber bullets and tear gas at peaceful protesters?
Okay, but we're not supporting that, right? We're talking about what's going on in New York City. You stop people from breaking into law-abiding people's stores.
Yes, do that. Absolutely.
But that's what we're saying. So we're in agreement.
But the military police
we're in agreement then, even of using the National Guard.
Isn't trained to do that. That isn't what that's why we don't have the military do local law enforcement. One of the big problems of local law enforcement has actually been the militarization, which occurred after 9/11, which occurred under Barack Obama as well. When you roll tanks into American streets and you treat the citizens like this is a war, you escalate the violence. So my point is, if you are opposed to the violence, sending in the military is exactly the wrong thing to do. Yes, people should have their property protected.
But you're not saying what the right thing to do is.
Better policing. That's the right thing.
But the police are going to have to do the same thing that the National Guard would do. Arrest people for smashing windows and breaking into buildings. They just might not have the resources to handle something on the scale that you're seeing in Manhattan.
Instead of saying, I'm going to send the military in and crush these protesters, and by the way, he's deeming them terrorists, right? Our fellow citizens, he's saying these are terrorists. If he had instead offered actual, no one's going to solve this problem overnight, but you can offer a few pieces of legislation that at least are an olive branch. Then you start to de-escalate rather than radicalizing, rather than going the police state, military state way, which never ends well. Give me an example. When does this ever end well?
Okay, well, we've never had this before. we've never had people smashing windows all down Manhattan. You look at Fifth Avenue is insane right now.
Yeah.
It looks like a bomb went off and shattered every window within 5-6 blocks.
Okay, so the debate is about the looters. Now, let me make this argument right off the bat. Okay, I just want to make this really clear. I do not agree with the looters. I think that if you're going to loot, and I know this is crazy, but if you're going to loot, I wouldn't steal it. I would just I know I'm not condoning this, but I'm saying I would just, if you're going to really rebel against the money, the machine, you would just break the stuff. That's it. You wouldn't even take it home with you. But if you're stealing it, clearly you're just being a thief and making the excuse of George Floyd to be the reason. The mom said she didn't want you to do that. Don't loot, okay? The mom of George Floyd doesn't want you to loot, okay? In the Rodney King's issue, when that situation happened, Rodney King had to make a statement and say, can we all just get along? Because people are just going a little crazy over this looting thing. Now, but that being said, looting is bad. Shouldn't be being done in the first place. If it's being done, it's being done in different perspectives. There's not just one main one. It's not because, oh, people are being criminal. Some people are doing it because they're trying to stick it to wealthy corporations, trying to get a message out. They're trying to get media attention. There's a number of reasons. So we can't just go directly, unless you literally ask every person who did the looting why they did it. Then you can be like, okay, I can say fair assessment. Fair assessment, you already had, you did your investigation. But if you didn't, you're just making a broad speculation. That's what Joe Rogan kind of did. He made a broad speculation, saying, okay, and then, he was saying through his argument, how do we put out the fire? How do we put out the fire? That's a very valid point. How do you put out this fire? Now, Crystal Ball did not really have a lot of opportunity, didn't have backup. She was kind of going against two people in a way, because both had some actually all three of them had some very valid arguments, but both were kind of having more arguments because she was on her own. Now, here's my argument, okay? You don't need to bring the military. She's right, you don't. You will increase violence that way. That's not going to help. You're actually infringing on Americans that way. And, Sager made a point about Little Rock. And I'm going to just throw that out there. Little Rock was because local authorities who were in charge of the state didn't want to follow the law. And that's why military was necessary. Because they are people with weapons. Now, are we saying that we're bringing the military to be the peacemakers between the looters and the police officers with who are using unnecessary force? That would be a better argument. That would be more fair assessment. That would be more, okay, I can level with you. But when you're saying you want to bring it so you can just make sure we can maintain control, and, it's kind of more of a fear tactic. I mean, here's the better solution. Why not work with local police and people in the local community who don't want any part of this? They can work together, come up with a plan to go to those big places, and the mom and pop shops as well. Also be there. The people who own the places be there. Make signs letting people know this is my job. This is where I come from. So that way people personally know not to mess with your property. And then on top of that, the people in the local community, the police officers that come together, they can come together. You can do this thing called report and report, whatever you want to call it, where you record videos of people doing the looting. That way police officers can arrest them later, or they can actually put the tab on them when they stole the products. Okay? There's all this way possible better solutions. The local community can come together, stop these looters. If they really feel like they're going against what this is all about, then people in the community can work together. Police officers in local communities can work together. There's no need. And the argument that they need military, National Guard is just fine. We don't need military. Police officers are using tear gas that are banned in warfare and rubber bullets. Okay, so I think they're pretty good when it comes with the weapons. And on top of that, our mayor in Los Angeles has funded our police department more than anything else at this point, including transportation and our hospitals. So let's get real here, okay? Let's level up with that situation. Police are fine, okay? looters are not hanging people. They are not killing people. Maybe they are beating people, and I don't agree with that. Whoever is doing this looting and is just beating people up and stuff like, you're just being a thief. You're not a part of the message. You're going against the message. But don't put them and clump them together with the peaceful protesters. Because now the focus, the narrative, the story is, okay, let's focus on the looters. Don't focus on George Floyd, who died by police officers' hands. Don't focus on the fact that police officers are using obsessive force now. Okay, obsessive force to attack people who are not armed with guns or sticks or weapons or bats or nothing. Just signs saying, I can't breathe. Okay? There are better solutions to this looting crisis. Okay? You can work with local people, local cops, local communities, and do that. That's faster. And it doesn't cost any taxpayer any dollars. At all. And we come together. It becomes a unity thing than a dividing thing. But to debate that the looters are the main focus and that's why we need military to come, that doesn't make any sense. The looters aren't the main focus. Just because you see buildings destroyed and stuff, that ain't the main focus. I heard about Mayor Bellagio, I think was the name, was that apparently he let the looters do their thing because he said he wanted to let it die out. That's a BS move. Come on, think about it. I could say that, but what if he only did that because he wanted the looters to do a lot of damage first? You know, let the looters do what they do. Hey, let them damage everything. Then afterwards, we'll have the right causes, the right reasons to use excessive force, brute force. Police officers now get the chance to say, hey, I'm tasing, pepper spray, anything I want to do. That's why Joe Rogan keeps saying, oh, it's because of after the looting they had to do this. It does that. You see, isn't that a coincidence that first they needed things to burn down and police officers didn't do anything because they were told not to do anything, and now they're told to do things but with obsessive force? Just seems like a coincidence, don't it? Look, guys, that's just a speculation. There's no facts behind that. But I'm just saying that theoretically that could be a possibility. And we need to take that serious when it comes to these arguments. Now, we need to focus on the task at hand, which is the priority, which is innocent man got killed. 3 officers are still out there who have not been committed of pressed any charges. I've heard from someone that they were new. There was 2 officers that were new to the police force. Now that argument I can throw out there, that's a very fair assessment to say that maybe they should do lesser time because they were police officers who are new to the job and they were maybe being pushed by other veterans to kind of follow their lead. Or at the same time, as a regular human being, you know when not to do something like that. If you see someone doing something like that, I would rather you go in and say, hey, this isn't right, than to just follow a veteran's lead, because you should know that having 3 officers on someone's body while another one is pressing his knee on his neck is just not right. Okay? So, a lot to be said here, but bottom line, there are better solutions than to bring the military.